Perfect. All right. I wanted to welcome everyone. First of all, I am not an expert in parenting. Um, I got a lot of my resources from these books. It's Gospel Powered Parenting, which is what I titled this course, and then Shepherding a Child's Heart. I found them both very helpful. Um, and so I just got all the good parts, mixed it in with my own thoughts, and then we have this course here. My hope for this session is that we see the big picture when it comes to parenting. You know, there are so many parenting books, right? And in those books, everyone backs up their methods with a bunch of statistics. It seems like it changes every decade, right? Like the style, the preferred method. What I have personally experienced and noticed is that every kid is different, and not one thing might not work for another. Eliab and Tobias, they're so different, right? Eliab, you could just get mad at him, say, oh, you hurt me, and he would get so sad, right? But if I said that to Tobias, he wouldn't care, right? He would laugh at you if you told him that you're angry or something. It's so polarizing. And so for me, I want to focus on the bigger goal, right? What drives us as parents? What should be our theology as parents? But at the same time, we do need practical advice as well. And so I brought in the big guns. I've asked Jenny and Kimmy, two of the greatest moms, to share their experiences and give us some advice. So we'll do the big picture lecture stuff first. And that'll be only a quick 20-minute big picture, what I really want you guys to get, and then switch to Jenny and Kimmy and hear their thoughts and just get the practical, really tangible things that you can take away. And this is also when you can ask questions. We'll save that to the very end. All right, so let's get started. What are some typical goals in parenting? I listed some of them, right? Your happiness, raising a good, obedient kid, making sure they're studious and successful, and then lastly, working their hearts to believe and trust in God. The first three goals, don't get me wrong, they're very good. But if that is the end goal, that's all we're shooting for, it can be superficial. If we're only concerned with our child's happiness, right, they're going to get spoiled. If we're only concerned with raising a quote unquote good kid, just obedient kid, they might obey temporarily because of fear, but then later when that fear is gone, they could just kind of let loose. And then finally, if we're only concerned with them being studious and successful, right, we set them up for failure, right? Either a life of idolatry or depression. The most important goal we should have as parents is this last one, right? This is the one the Bible is concerned about because this is what determines everything, not just their eternal destination, but also their present lives right now, right? There is a deeper joy that is not superficial and fleeting. There's obedience that comes from a regenerated heart, and they will work faithfully, not for worldly ambition, but because God calls them to. God tells us to put God first and the rest will follow. The problem is, if we're honest, right, this sometimes isn't our primary goal, right? Typically, our goals start at number one, and then depending on the age of the child, it goes down the line. As babies, we want them to be happy, right? Healthy. We bend over backwards to make them smile. We care so much about their happiness. Then as toddlers and children, we want them to be good, obedient, follow my commands, listen, obey. Then as teenagers, we want them to be studious, right? Get into a good college. We want them to be hard and work hard and be active in sports and do activities. We push them. And then finally, as young adults, we just pray and hope that they make the right decisions. They trust in Jesus. They won't do anything bad. However, you can expect them to be passionate about Jesus, to go to church, if we set the tone that God isn't a priority from the very beginning. right? Number 4 needs to be our goal as parents. And I think it's safe to assume that we probably all knew this. However, we can approach it wrong in our parenting, right? Typically, we play a lot of defense rather than offense. What I mean by defense is that we protect, we shelter, uh, we filter bad content online. We even move homes for good schools. We make sure that their friends are well behaved. And don't get me wrong, this is something you should do in the beginning, right? Defense should be strict when they're young. However, there has to be a point in time when you have to go on the offense because they will be exposed. You cannot shelter them from everything. There will be a day, maybe not, but it could happen when they go on a date that you don't approve of. There might be a day when, they go to a party and they're asked to do drugs or drink or sleep around. And you just cannot simply lock them in their rooms forever. It's inevitable. And so we do have to be proactive here. We got to go on the offense. We got to try to equip them so that when they do face the world, they will be ready. And this is where gospel-powered parenting comes in. It's attacking the heart so that when our children are exposed to the things of this world, they will respond in a godly way. Now, why did I just say the heart? Well, it's because this is what controls every human being, right? It's our hearts. The problem is our hearts are sinful, right? This is what the Bible tells us. Our children are born sinners. No one has to teach them to cut and lie. No one has to teach them how to lie, how to manipulate. And all of that stems from the heart. Proverbs 4:23, above all, guard your heart, for it is a wellspring of life. Luke 6:45, the good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. For from within, out of the heart of man come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, Mark 7:21. And there's a plethora more, right? This is why the gospel is so important in our parenting, because we cannot change hearts, but God can, and he works through the gospel. And so this is, once again, what this course is all about. Gospel-powered parenting means shepherding a child's heart, right? They do go hand in hand. And we shepherd our child's heart through 6 different ways, and I've broken it down for each session. Example and prayer will be the first one. Next, we'll learn about discipline and authority, and then last one, we'll do communication and affection. As parents, we can guide our children in the ways of the gospel through these methods, right? This is what our aim should be. Hopefully, everyone's tracking with me. So we'll go to example and prayer. First and foremost, prayer. The Bible teaches us that our children are born sinners, that they are separated from God. And this means that just because we take them to church, it doesn't mean they're saved. It would be prudent for us to assume that they don't know God, right? Even if they say the right words, assume that they don't get it. The Bible says this is a spiritual war, right? Their hearts are naturally inclined to hate God, not love God. And see, here's the hardest part about all this. There's nothing we can do to regenerate their hearts. We cannot earn or buy their salvation. It is only by grace. And that is why the most important thing gospel-centered parents will do is pray. If your child had a life-threatening sickness, God forbid, but let's say that your child had this disease, how much would we pray? Oh, we would be on our knees every single day, right? Every minute, every hour. But the sin in our hearts, the Bible tells us, is much worse, right? And I know it's not as urgent as, let's say, a life-threatening disease. Most likely your children are going to grow old and you do have more time. But the reality is And the picture that the Bible portrays for us is that our children are born in trouble. They do have a spiritual condition. And if we believe that, then we must be in prayer, right? This is what we need to fight for. This is what we need to prioritize. When I was younger, before I was married, I thought I would become a missionary. But what deterred me was the idea of raising my future kids in a foreign country. I didn't want them growing up at a disadvantage. I thought I would be depriving them if they didn't grow up in America. And it is true, right? They will miss out on things if they grow up in a different country. But see, if this is what our hearts are most concerned about as parents, we miss the real battle, right? What is more important than being parents who provide materialistic things? What's more important than being parents who are, go-getters and making sure our children aren't behind is being parents who pray daily for our child's faith and heart. Isn't it true that we can get so caught up in running the race? Are they in the right school? Are they behind in sports and academic? We worry about things that are sometimes secondary, right? What we really need to focus on is their relationship with God. And this means first and foremost, we need to pray. This is the most important way we shepherd their hearts. Second thing, children learn more with their eyes than their ears. They are watching, right? They hear our fights. They absorb our attitudes. You can't pretend at home, right? If you tell them to be generous, but you're stingy, if you tell them to be nice, but you belittle, if you tell them to be kind, but you're selfish and mean, right? If you tell them to say sorry, but you never do, it's not going to stick. Children will see our hypocrisy. And so gospel-motivated parents will lead by example. If you want your kid to be humble, you have to be humble, right? You have to say sorry to your spouse, and you have to say sorry to them when you're wrong. If you want them to be grateful, you have to be appreciative too, right? You have to thank your spouse, thank your kids, recognize their good behavior. And then lastly, if we want to lead by example, our children cannot be the center of our homes. They cannot be the center of our lives, right? If you sacrifice tithing, if you sacrifice worship for sports or school, that sends a message, right? It tells them that it's okay that God is second. And if God is second, the Bible tells us that he is not God and he is nothing. In San Diego, I did youth ministry when I first started seminary. We had held a PTA meeting on what our Bible lesson would be and our vision for how the parents can minister to their youth. Maybe one or two parents showed up. Then we had a PTA meeting for college prep, right? Everything you need to do to get ready. And the meeting was completely full. Not that it's bad, obviously. And as first generation Korean parents, they didn't know this stuff, so it is important. But my point is, kids see and know what the priority is, right? They know what is important to you. Here's a quote: "To give children good instruction and a bad example is but beckoning to them with their head to show them the way to heaven while we take them by the hand and lead them in the way to hell." Here's the problem though. We aren't perfect models, right? We don't want them to follow our example all the time. But see, what we have to understand is that this can actually be a good thing. Our failures can be our best example. In our attempts to live out the gospel, it exposes our sin and weakness, which ought to make us more humble and more attractive to our children, right? They don't need perfect parents. They need humble ones. See, humble parents are quick to admit wrong. Humble parents don't just preach Jesus, they need Jesus. Humble parents are slow to anger because they know that they can fall into the same sin. And so it is okay to trip and fall as long as we remember to keep running to Jesus, right? That's the example our children need to see. In our failures and adversities, do we try and get out of it ourselves? Do we make excuses? Do we lash out in sin? Or do we run to Jesus? See, our children need to see the latter, right? Because then they will be encouraged to do the same. And so to summarize this session, right? Gospel-powered parenting is shepherding our child's hearts to know, trust, and live for Jesus, right? That's the real war. That's the real battle. And we could do this first by prayer, right? Not just praying for their health and praying for a good day at school, but praying for God to forgive us and change us. My prayers before their mealtime changed when I heard them pray out loud, right? I tell Eliab to pray. He would say, thank you for this food. Thank you for this day. In Jesus' name, amen. Not that that's wrong, right? Because he's 4 or 5. But I wanted more. And so I when I pray out loud in front of them, I know that they're absorbing it. So I pray for what they really need to hear, what is really important, for God to be our everything. Next thing, we also shepherd by example, right? You living your life in light of the gospel can help your child do the same. My kids play the same way I do. They laugh at the same things that I laugh at. They yell the same way that I do, right? Ellie was like, Tobias, stop. They copy everything, And so what I want them to copy: patience, humility, gentleness, love, forgiveness, joy. These are things that we have to pursue as parents, knowing that our children are watching, knowing that they're modeling our behavior. So for the following sessions, we'll go over some other things that we can do to shepherd our child's heart, but for now, we will leave it at that. I wanted to move on and talk about what this really looks like and give some more practical insight into parenting. Now, I am a parent, obviously. I have children, 5 and 3, but, at this stage, I only know so much. And so I wanted to talk to some experts, Jenny and Kimmy. If you guys don't mind sharing your video, I think that would be helpful. We're going to try and answer some questions. I first and foremost wanted to thank you both for coming on, for sharing your evening with us. We would love to hear your personal perspective, what worked, what didn't work, what you would have maybe done differently, some advice for all of us. And so I'll kick it. I'll start things off, and I'll throw this to Jenny first. At what point did you play more offense than defense? And once again, to reiterate that is, at what point did you stop filtering their phones? At what point are you allowing them to watch movies on their own? Screen time, games, or are you still monitoring that 24/7? What about their friends? Do you choose? Do you pick that out? So how do you navigate through that, Jenny? We'd love to hear how you did it.
This is a tricky question because I feel like this is a struggle that is very real at the ages that my kids are at right now. But when I think about the question about, am I still protecting them, and in the way you phrased it, I think there has to be some context. So I stayed home with the kids. I decided after Jeffrey was a little over a year to stop teaching and stay home with the kids, well, at least with him. And then I got pregnant with Christina. And then by the time, I was ready to go back to work with Christina, I got pregnant again with Isaac. It wasn't what I anticipated. First off, I never imagined myself as a stay-at-home mom. And I think that was a very big transition for me, especially because I lay so much of my identity in my work. So that was a huge transition in itself. We always say we don't want to parent our kids the way we were. Like, there are aspects of our own childhood upbringing that we didn't like, and we want to, we tell ourselves we'll never do it the way our parents, some of the things that our parents did we didn't like, we'll never do it that way, right? But I think there's I think you just don't realize how much of your upbringing is in you, and how much of your parents, like, you start to understand them more. And I think that, all that said, I feel like, because I stayed home with the kids and I chose a different path from my mom, I felt like I got to know my kids a little better. I think we came from immigrant families who worked all the time. And so, I never really shared things with my mom or with my parents. They just weren't home a lot. I had my grandmother who didn't speak much. And so she was our caretaker. And that was normal. That was, I didn't think of my childhood as a bad childhood. But this day and age, it's very different, right? We're very involved in our children's upbringing. We're very involved in their activities. We want to expose them to everything. And I think there has to be some level of, reason as well. I remember when we first moved to the South Bay, and I would talk to parents who said, oh, are you going to, when I first had kids, there was mention of what sports teams, am I going to list my children in? And I remember thinking, well, they're toddlers. I don't think they need to be in a sports team yet. But I remember getting into that, feeling like maybe I should, maybe I need to, maybe I'm missing out, maybe my kids are missing out. And it didn't make sense, because after I decided not to go back to work, it didn't make sense for me to be spending all this money and putting them in programs that were, for fun. But it was more this fear. A lot of parents put them in these programs for fear of their kids missing out and all of that. So, that continues today, even with my, middle schooler. All his peers are taking classes, extra academic classes, because they need to stay on top, right, of their academics. We're in a very highly academic area. We live in Cupertino. I know this as a teacher, but I think because we chose the path of putting our kids in a parent participatory community school, I feel like we're just in a different place. I know the school, I know the people, I know the families that my kids interact with. I know every single family. And so it's a little different in that there's no good friend, bad friend, good groups, bad groups in that sense, because we're all working together as a community. And I want my kids to be exposed to that. I want my kids to also know that, they're going to have to learn to make decisions, and I can't protect them from it all, right? They have to learn to fail on their own. And that was one of the reasons why we chose the school that we did. It was a very hard decision, because we were coming from, private Christian preschool upbringing. And then Jeffrey even, in fact, had his kindergarten year. My first child had his kindergarten year at that school, and we loved it. And when we got the call that we lotteried into the school, we were on the wait list. And when we lotteried into the school that we are at right now, I hesitated. I thought, oh, I'm not sure I'm ready. Isaac's only 2. And in order to be in a parent participatory school, I'd have to put him in daycare. And none of my kids, after I stopped working, I didn't feel they needed daycare. And so all of that said, I just felt I didn't want to let go of control. That's what it was. The sense of control that I have over their academics, their upbringing, whatever, even though in my mind, I'm not putting them in all these programs already, in my mind, I had control over it all, right? But one of the reasons why we chose this program, where it's parent community based, but it's also it's a school that doesn't put emphasis on grades, and it's more of a love of learning approach that they take with education. And I think that was a hard thing for me to do, even as an educator, because I was trained in the traditional way, and having to let go of all of that, I had to yield the reins a little bit. And George knew this. He was all for this school. He said, if I had grown up in a school like this, with this kind of environment, I think I would have excelled in so many areas. I would just, I would explore areas I never thought I could. They dive deep in their learning. And for me, it just was so just like the times we are in, it's very uncertain. Putting my kids in this program felt very uncertain to me. And George knew that too, that because I was going to be putting in the volunteer hours, I would be learning a lot as well. In a way, it really helped me open my eyes to different ways of parenting. It really forced me to open myself up to others as well, because you're comfortable with who you're comfortable with, right? It's hard to open yourself up to different people of not just different ethnicities, but different lifestyles and different all of that, right? So it just was very eye-opening for me. But I think in all of this, I think when it comes to boundaries, I felt like we were all in it together. We were learning together. I was learning to parent together with these groups of, with the community we were in. But I also felt like I wanted my kids to learn that as a parent, I'm learning and I'm making mistakes. So I really like how that phrase you use, that parents are not perfect. Because even if you had the perfect parent, was that something to, what does that teach your child when they fail? Because in order to strive and succeed, you have to, there's an amount of trying involved, right? Successes and failures get you to be better. And I remember the moment I went back into teaching this past year, after 10 and a half years of being at home as a stay-at-home parent, my younger two, so Christina, my middle child, was very upset. She thought, who's going to pick me up from school? I can't believe you're not going to be putting in all these hours anymore. I mean, I was going to have to manage, right? I was going back part-time, but I think she was scared. This is an unknown for her, right? So for her, the kids, I'm always with the kids. There's no need for cell phones because I'm always with them. But for Jeffrey, it was really interesting. He took it, he said it with pride that, oh, my mom's going back to work. She's going to, in fact, she's teaching a subject she's never taught before. And it scared me to death to teach, a subject I've never taught before. But that was my way into the school district. And I remember when he was journaling, he allows me to read some parts of his journal. I just was so surprised at how he viewed my take on going back to work. I was really uncertain. I cried a lot. I just wasn't sure I had what it took to go back to work. But he saw it as, my mom's trying something really new, something different. And I'm not going to be scared because, I'm not going to be scared for her. I'm going to rally her on, and it's going to be hard, but he just took it on with pride. And I was so surprised at his take, because I was sad that I'd be taking a step back from his experience in middle school. At the same time, it probably was a good thing for me to go back to work at that time, because I, had I been a stay-at-home parent while he was exploring middle school, I felt like I would be looking over his shoulder all the time, making sure his homework's always getting done, because I just feel like he doesn't have all those structures in place, because that's just not his strength in a lot of ways, right? And so in a lot of ways I had to let go of that, and I just felt like so many things fell into place in that way, with my work and the school and even my teaching, and all of that. So it's just surprising how God makes all these things work, and how in the end the kids saw, and it's true, they emulate they see what is happening to you as a person, not just as your parent, and they emulate all of that. They learn from that, and they see your stresses, your fears, and they see how you react to them and how you take it, right? So I don't know if that answers your question. If
Well,
that was
it sounds like control is almost taken from, not taken,
right.
but you kind of almost had no choice but to kind of let go. And yeah, so yeah, that's, appreciate your sharing your experience. Kimmy, how about you? How did it work out for you? I know you got little older now, kids, and so do you even have to manage them at all? How does it work for you guys?
Am I on? I'm so technologically unsavvy, so everyone can hear me.
Yep.
Hey, everybody. I'm assuming that everybody's kids are younger than mine. I've got all grown-up kids. Audrey is going to be a junior in high school, Sydney a freshman in college, and Madison a sophomore in college. We didn't even get the iPhone, the smartphone, until, like, I think Audrey was in kindergarten when the first smartphone came out. So, when they were little and if they were squirming, and I mean, I had to like actually entertain them. I couldn't like bust out my phone and be like, here, play this. But I felt like a magician, out of my purse, like came this and that and here, and how can I entertain you and keep you, you know, keep you sane and not, going crazy, throwing a tantrum. So those were different times. But what I remember about, I want to try to break this up practically for your parents out there, since your kids, I'm assuming, are, very, very young. I would say, in terms of playing offense, like, yeah, you start off playing defense for many, many years. I would say all throughout elementary school, because you are protecting them, but you're also trying to teach them within the context of a safe structure. So, you're managing, their lives, who they're playing with, and what they're doing at all times. And you have a lot of say, and you should have a lot of say. They should know who's boss. If I can get on my soapbox for just a little bit, I see kids nowadays where you see that they act like they rule the world and they are the center of the universe, and their parents give them that, by giving them sometimes just too many choices. They ask their child, oh, what do you want to do? Or you want to, and they give them full power. Or if the parent decides to do something and the child doesn't like it, then they say, oh, okay, we'll cancel, that plan. Tell me what you want to do, Bobby. Or I've met this one family once where the child didn't like her name. So they decided, okay, well, what name do you want? And we'll change the name to whatever you want. And so the child is given, again, too much control, too much power, and they become very, I think, self-centered. We're already like sinner marrying another sinner, raising little sinners, and you're just encouraging that by giving the child everything that they want. Like Pastor Simon said, it's our goal for our children is, it's really not happiness, it's holiness, right? Getting them to the point where they make their faith their own and realize that, they're not it. It's all about Christ. But to get them to that point, it's just, from day one, you're trying to help that child become less and less self-centered, because our natural tendency is to just think of me, myself, and I. So I think that when in their formative years, that's really key, is to help them to think outward. That's really hard. It's hard to teach them to share and to think about others. And but that I think that that's something that we just have to be really intentional as parents, so that the child doesn't think that they deserve everything and anything they want, and they're entitled to the world. So going back to that kind of defense, yes, you protect them, you're kind of controlling their environment, making them feel safe and making them feel loved at all times, right? No matter how many mistakes you make, no matter what you do, mommy and daddy were always going to love you. And guess what? Jesus absolutely will always love you. And just taking those teachable moments as much as possible to remind them that not only are they loved by their family, but they're loved by God, who watches them at all times, that they're never alone, and just really instilling that from the get-go. And then I think that kind of moving on to middle school is when you definitely start encouraging and fostering more independence. Once they hit middle school, I said, I'm no longer making your lunches, you guys. You're completely capable of making your own lunch, of getting up early so that you can have your breakfast, that, you can pour cereal, you can toast bread, you can butter it, all those things. I just completely said, you're on your way to, really being a teen now. And so then just letting go more and more, but you're still watching over them. It's just that you don't have a say perhaps in who they make friends with. The difference is at that point is that line of communication is so key. Like in middle school, I know who they hung out with. I know everything that they did. I know what they were watching, their whatever, their book they're reading. Just, I knew the details because I asked all the time. I was like constantly just questioning, not in a interrogating way or nagging way, but just, I want to know what's going on in your life today. And so I think that that's kind of how I watched over them, at a distance, I guess, not making them feel suffocated, encouraging them to grow more and more independent, but always watchful, and just making sure that they're on that right path at all times. So yeah, that communication of just keeping that flowing and making them feel safe, that they could tell you anything, good or bad, right? And then high school, I mean, you guys are probably way far away from that. Your kids are, that's like years ahead. But I think it's good to keep in mind that there are these stages of shifting, again, what Pastor Simon's talking about, from defense, and slowly middle school, a little bit more offense. And then high school, they're pretty much 100% on their own. I'm not monitoring, what movies they're watching, in terms of like telling them, you can't do this, you can't do that. No, they're making those decisions on their own, but I'm going to ask them, hey, what did you watch? Well, what's in right now? What TikTok video are you watching? Because again, that line of communication, I'm constantly talking with my kids so that they know that, hey, if I'm going to go out tonight, I'm going to have to tell my mom about it. And, they know that at the end of the day or the next day, I'm going to ask this question. So how was it? How was your get together? And they have to be ready to provide the details, because that's something that they've always done. So I think they are kind of like self-monitoring now, that, when I make these decisions, will I feel comfortable telling my mom and dad about it? Because I know they're going to ask me about it. So just that honest communication. And I think that helps them stay in check. So yeah, and at that point, they are, again, on their own, and hopefully you have provided enough structure in their lives and teaching in their lives that, that they've got God, the Holy Spirit, with them always, just speaking to them and making sure that, they are making those wise decisions for themselves that, will honor God in every way. So that's just kind of the gist, the big picture of, our formative years, elementary, middle, and high school. So I
Awesome.
hope,
Yeah,
I hope.
that was great. Thank you. Jenny, to pass it back to you, how old are your kids now? Could you remind
My
us?
kids are 8, 10, and 12, going into 3rd grade, 5th grade, and 7th grade.
Do they have phones?
No.
No.
And they probably won't get phones till I was hoping till later in high school, but as I'm teaching high school now, I see it there isn't a single student without a phone in high school. But I don't think it's necessary in middle school at this time, but that's probably because of the situation we're in. I'm at school a lot. I'm at their school a lot, even though I'm not with teaching their group. I'm usually with their classmates. So I know their families and their classmates and see their parents also aiding in the classroom a lot. So there really isn't a need. But what also helps is that I think one of the things that came up is if you're constantly asking questions and talking to your kids, you know when something's wrong. You also know when they're having a social dispute, and you're more aware when you have that regular conversation, regular check-in going. And so I have those conversations a lot with the kids, especially with their friends. If they're bothered by something a friend did or something that had happened at school, we have those conversations, and it really helps to talk it out. But then you find the time, knowing your child, you know when is a good time to talk to them, right? A lot of times it's when they're older. It's usually when they're tucked in bed, and the lights are out and they like to cuddle, and most most of my kids do. But that's a really good time to have them chat. Another time is when you have one child in the car and you're taking them to practices, and there's no eye contact because you're sitting side by side or in the back. They're usually in the back, and you have those conversations. Surprisingly, things will come up. You just have to ask, and they have a lot to say. They don't always bring it up on their own. Right. But yeah, I think it's communication is huge.
You guys are perfect, right on, spot on. You guys are stealing my material for the next 2 lessons, so good job. But yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. Yeah, Hetty mentioned that as well. Her conversations in the car were the best because they can't go anywhere, and so they're stuck and they have to talk with you. But yeah, thank you. Next question. One of the best ways to set an example is our marriages. Is there anything intentional that you do in your marriage or even in just your personal life to help teach the gospel to your children? Kimmy, I'll start with you. Like, anything you and saying do intentionally? Do you guys fight in front of your kids? Do you make up in front of your kids? Is there something that you do to help teach the gospel in your everyday life for your children?
Yeah, Sang and I, we keep it real. We fight in front of the kids. We have disagreements, right? But we also ask for forgiveness. We apologize. We hug. We show affection to one another as well as to the kids. I mean, it's kind of crazy. You'll see like it's really 5 adults like getting in bed together, and we still cuddle. It's crazy. The 5 of us, we all like barely fit on the bed now. But yeah, I mean, I think our kids know that that we're honest about everything. I think that one thing that Sang and I've tried to do is we've tried to always share with our girls our mistakes, hoping that they'll learn from our mistakes, right? And how God has changed our lives, what he has done in big ways and small ways. We just try to share as much as possible about our past as well as things that we struggle with presently. I feel like when I do a devotional and God just really speaks to me, and I share that with my kids. I really enjoy like just sharing my heart with them and then hearing them respond to that. one of the things that we do as a family is we do a Bible app together where we do a family devotions, and that's just a great opportunity to learn about how they think about, what God says, and scripture in the Bible. And sometimes it's like, yeah, um, it really moves them. And other times it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I've heard that a million times. I mean, there's just different responses. They're teenagers, so depending on their mood. But but yeah, sometimes I'm just really like amazed by how deeply they think about the Bible, and then other times I recognize that, okay, I think I need to do a little bit more teaching in this area, because I can tell that they're confused, or their thoughts are not quite crystallized. They're not concrete yet, and so it gives me a lot of information about where they are in their walk. I mean, all three of them are confirmed, so they've professed their faith publicly. But before that, I never assumed that they had a relationship with Christ. Um, I guess because I have so many friends who, are in the ministry, and I've heard, just so many stories about their children falling away, in particular once they, graduate from high school and they move on to college. Just, um, these sons and daughters saying, I don't believe in, in Jesus, and they're, dad's a pastor, mom's, someone human, and so you just don't take it for granted. You got to make sure that their faith is their own. And so that's why, in particular, why I ask so many questions, because if I ask a question about their faith and they don't know, I mean, it's okay that they don't know, but that tells me, okay, this is again an area that I need to go through, walk with them, and make sure that they have a good understanding, so that hopefully their thoughts connect with their heart, and they can be genuine in their faith. So I gosh, when I think of our day to day, I think we just try to celebrate one another. I mean, when I think about in the gospel, it's all about relationships, right? Your relationship with God, your relationship with others, and as a family, it's like you. It's easy to take for granted that you are all tied together because you share the same blood. But I think relationships are hard, and it takes work, it takes effort. And if you want a good relationship, you've got to invest that time and energy to loving each other. And so simple things that we'll do, like whoever walks in the door, it's a big like party in the house when someone walks in. So, for a while we were playing Cool in the Gang, Celebrate Good Times. Like every time someone walked in the door, we'd play that. Because I want, as a family, for us to like really like each other, if that makes sense, right? And to show that we enjoy spending time together, that we're not together just because we're forced to be together, but we're together because we want to be together. And so that's part of just building relationship. And in the context of relationship and having a loving, trusting relationship, I think that's when then you're able to really minister to one another. So I think that's really key in a family relationship, to make sure that that relationship is strong, that you are on good terms with your children. And honestly speaking, like my relationship with each of my girls is very different, because they're different. Their personalities are different. Some I have to set more boundaries. Others I'm a little bit more loose. But whatever their needs are, I have to adjust and work that relationship differently. And whether it's more time with one than some of the others, or the different things that I do with each child to foster that relationship. But yeah, I'm just very, very cognizant of that, because again, I mean, you think about people that you would witness to, you know, it's much more effective to witness to someone that you really share a bond with, right? That you have a good relationship with. That person trusts you, you trust them. There's honesty, there's vulnerability, there's transparency. Then, you know, when you're sharing the gospel, it just, wow, you know, it's much more effective than sharing with somebody that you don't like, that you don't, you know, trust, that you are not on good terms with. So I think it's the same way. If you want to be a good witness to your children, have a great relationship. Make sure that's a strong, strong base. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I hope that helps.
thanks. Jada, we got about 5 minutes. If you don't mind sharing your thoughts on how, if there's anything that you guys do intentionally.
I think the only thing I would add, I mean, I agree with everything Kimmy has just mentioned. For George and me, I feel like, you know, especially when he was working in startups early on, his hours were long, and he'd always be on call. And so we just made a habit, even since the kids were since they were babies, to take walks. We would take walks around the house, literally after putting the kids to bed. It'd just be, you know, just a few times, but it would be our time of just catching up with each other. And that was, I don't think I realized how much, I mean, there were periods of time where that stopped, and we've moved so many times. If you know our family, we just keep moving. Every year and a half to 2 years, we move. And but it's just been nice in that now that the kids are older, you know, they can put themselves to bed, and we just walk around the neighborhood, and it really has helped us be able to connect. And I think it's important for our kids to see. For George, he didn't have, you know, as close as he is to his parents, he didn't have that strong father figure. And so he's always showering me with like, you know, for the important dates where I'm not as romantic and you know, I don't need flowers, I don't need chocolates, I don't need any of those things, but he does that because he wants the kids to know that a husband should shower his wife with you know, with love. And even though I'm like, I really don't, you know, need all that, I know that, you know, him cooking in the kitchen on weekends because he wants to and because he enjoys it, it shows the kids his way of loving, right? And we all have different strengths, we all have different giftings. I think the kids recognize that. We talk about it a lot, just to, you know, just and we fight a lot out loud, and they know. I mean, we keep it real as well, and they know. And I think that the important piece in all of this is for them to see that we can come back together because God loved us, God loves us, and forgiven us. We can forgive each other, and we can also find a ground where we can, you know, a common ground where we can talk and we can take breaks from each other. I think I had mentioned that in the conflict resolution piece a few weeks back, but you know, I learned a lot of things about myself after having kids, and that was a really trying process for me, just because you know, my parents, they fought a lot, but they also hid a lot of things under the rug. And so that wasn't helpful to me because there was so much, they would explode, and then there would be a lot of silence afterward, right? So you don't know what's really happening, and that can be very fearful. It can be very frightening for a child. Of course, we don't tell them everything. You know, there's stages where they can understand, but I also want, you know, the kids to know as they get older, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be things we don't agree on, but we work at it. It's not going to be easy, but we work at it, and God, he knows our hearts. And so if if they can understand that. Another thing, another non-negotiable for me for in terms of their activities is the one thing I really wanted them to have with me was being able to go to a Bible study fellowship where we'd be learning a book once a book a year. And in those car rides, for me, it was a really good opportunity to be able to apply a lot of those questions to their daily lives. We'd have these great conversations in the car, all three of them. And then the nice thing about it, because I would tell George, you know, there's a men's group, you can also learn the same material. And he would say, as an elder, but also as, you know, someone who is just super busy because he has his you know, he's got dozens of meetings, right? He'll say, I know it all. I don't need to take classes on the Bible, especially when he was, you know, taking his, he was getting ready to be ordained as an elder. But I mean, he would get recordings on tape with the chapters we were reading, and on his own time while he was driving to work, he would listen to that, and he'd have those conversations with the kids too. So I really felt blessed in that way, that we were able to take what we were learning, what they were learning in their class, you know, in their Bible study class, and I was taking away all these things with a group of women who really want to learn. These are women I don't even know, but they all wanted to learn. And I think that's something that I really cherish, because it's hard. It's hard bringing the Bible into your life if you don't, you know, if you don't do this on a regular basis. And so that kind of, you know, it's not just Bible stories, but really understanding who God is and the character of God, and how he loves us, and how he's, you know, how we can be that light to others. So I really appreciate that part.
What was that? Was that a class that you guys took, or was that a book?
It's called Bible Study Fellowship, and Kimmy knows this too. She was part. It's a, well, I'm going to say international organization where they take one book a year, or and they study in depth. It's like having, and it's by region. It's by region. Yeah. So we meet at a local church, and it's not church-based at all. It's just we borrow a church facility, and we take our kids there, and it actually, I feel like, saved me when I rarely saw George after having given birth to Christina. She was only 6 months old. I joined a Bible study fellowship group, and that was, to me, better than any mom's play group. At that year, we were studying the book of Isaiah, and I really felt supported in terms of like not feeling alone. And I needed that, because I just remember George working so hard, and it was, you know, it wasn't that we were struggling in our marriage, but I just felt so alone being a mom of two young kids, and not knowing, you know, how to be a stay-at-home mom at that time. So yeah, it's free for any, you know, parent who is taking time off of work.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.